And then there's this also element of, evaluating when we do lose deals, like why, right? And so doing like a loss kind of like summary of, okay, why did we lose this deal? Because a lot of times we're just so focused on kind of praising the wins and, okay, we did a great job here. And we don't necessarily spend as much time focusing on why did we lose a deal. And I could easily tell it was not because they'd read some brief before each of the meetings we went into. It was because they'd been in all the meetings, all about learning from each other. Because I think that's a really big element that I've at least learned, I think, as I progressed in my career.
Hello and welcome back to our listeners to the Newell podcast. We are lucky enough to have Michelle Carter with us today, talking all things go-to-market, sales, leadership, and specifically lessons learned and what success looks like. So super excited to have you, Michelle. Would love to just, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction on where you're at now, how you got there, and then we can just dive in because I know I've got some pretty interesting questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's lovely to speak with you today. I'm at Mastercard. I lead our sales team in our services organization in North America. I've been in this role for the past 4 years. I've been with Mastercard for the past 11. Pre-Mastercard was with a software technology firm that was purchased by Mastercard back in 2015. So I was there for 4 years prior to the acquisition. So have done the very small company and seen it grow. And then, now at the 40,000 person organization.
So you've been through and lived through and stayed in an acquisition. Oh my goodness. So when you're at the previous company, what was your role?
I had various different sales leadership roles. So always in the market. I've always been client facing, always been incredibly motivated by the results that sales provides, right? Sales is binary, right? You either made your number or you didn't make your number. And that type of kind of culture and element really motivates me in my day-to-day.
We are honestly the same person. When I was at school, I was like, I'm never going to be able to make any money. I'm never going to be a lawyer. I'm never going to be a doctor. Fell out of university and ran into sales. And I was like, what do you mean if I could just hit this specific number and work all hours of the day, I'll get paid for it. I don't actually have to be like study for 10 years. And it was just like a crazy world that it's funny how that can motivate you. And it's just like, you either know if you're good or not. And then if you're receptive to feedback, you can make yourself good. And I just love the whole element of being able to see your gaps, improve, feedback. Like you just mentioned that, and that just gets me like really excited.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, there's very little that's open to interpretation, right? And there's so many other fields where there's a lot of the qual side of things, interpretation, etc.
Of course.
And at the end of the day, either you're good at it because you got there, you sold the deal, or you didn't, right? So yeah.
I love it. Awesome. So now at Mastercard, now in senior leadership for sales, go-to-market, etc. Would love just to understand, just to get specific for the listeners, what are your kind of like top priorities? Like, are you just looking after the sales team, or is it more of a broader execution, or is it more just like revenue targets? Talk to us about kind of those priorities, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, so we have very lofty goals every single year, as you can imagine. The year finishes. We had a really strong year last year, and then now, of course, we're thinking about
just forgotten about how strong it was straight into
2026, right? So we do have, as I mentioned, lofty sales goals. They are focused around our product families. So we have 4 main product families. One is our kind of security solutions area. So think cyber, fraud, etc.
Nice.
One is business and market insight. So that's our consulting practice. We're actually the world's largest payments consultancy. It's all of our market insights and data. Then we have our consumer acquisition and engagement segment, which is our product family, which is all about how we kind of personalize, reach out to customers, all of the acquisition elements that our issuers and retailers are trying to drive, engagement from. And then lastly, open finance. So those are our sort of 4 product families. And I have a team of around 250 sellers that focus on driving revenue against all of those different areas. And we're very quarterly focused, but also monthly focused. So we have monthly forecasts that the team needs to hit. So a lot of focus.
It's interesting, the monthly versus the quarterly. I've done both, and I've built companies in both. And like, it does benefit so much from that monthly, but it kind of just depends on the deal cycle. But it's interesting. So When you look at your actual sellers, so did you say 250? Love that. So are they more, and I guess it will depend over the four pillars that you just spoke through, but what does the sales process look like for them in the sense that, are you managing a team that's like hyper complex enterprise into these large organizations, or is it more high transactional quick sales, or is it just a mix?
It's a mix. So we have some sales that are going to be, at the very small price points, right?
Yeah.
In the five figures. And then we have, multi-million dollar deals, right?
Yeah.
So it really just sort of depends what the product is, what the offering is. Some of it is going to be, a couple conversations, you get the deal. Others are, 12, 18 months in the making to finally bring the opportunity to fruition.
So this is super interesting because I like this, because like this is why I love speaking to new people, and I'm super curious. You're probably the first person that we've had on this podcast that's got such, in the sales leadership role, such an array of like different elements of a sales cycle underneath them, right? So for you, do you have like frontline leadership between you and I guess those 250, and then is it tiered into those four?
Yeah, so it's actually segment based. So I have a senior vice president over our US financial institutions,
Nice.
all of our USFI area, and market development, which is all of our kind of retail, travel,
Got it.
restaurants, et cetera. Then I have digital partnerships and fintechs. Then I have our co-brand center of excellence. Co-brand is obviously something that's been growing for us. And so it's our biggest issuers on the co-brand side and the biggest merchants that are, related to those co-brands. And so that's sort of how the organization is made up. And then you have sellers that specialize in those verticals underneath those senior vice presidents.
This is so interesting. Okay, so then with the senior vice presidents, do you have and they all report into you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, cool. So do you have any direct contact with the sellers?
For sure. Yeah. So, whether I'm joining them in various different, client meetings, whether we're doing just leadership meetings on how they can be better, from a sales standpoint and training elements and so forth. But yes, I try to be as hands-on as I can be, but yet also obviously not trying to micromanage, my SVPs or the VPs under them that are managing the teams, right?
Yeah, of course. I love what you just said about kind of like sales excellence and that training piece, because we see, and we work with so many different customers, but like underperformance is just like is widely accepted. Like those figures are still crazy, right? So when you look at the four different pillars or the segments, etc., what do you see as like success when you think of like performance, culture, coaching? What does that look like in your world? Because I built sales excellence companies, and I still just think the lack of care, or not the lack of care, that's the wrong word, but the lack of emphasis on actually getting the rep to where they need to be is still like a massive gap within our market.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that it comes down to, right? One, it's keeping motivation high. And I think that's 100%. What's so challenging when you're setting quotas, because, we have these crazy growth rates every year. You need to make sure, obviously, the number gets filtered down to the individual sellers. But if they're looking at January and thinking there's no way I'm going to possibly get up that mountain this year, in January, then you've lost the motivation, right? And so you need to make sure that you're keeping the number high enough that you're driving the results that we need to drive, yet also realistic enough. So I think that's the element that is just so key.
That's huge.
Making sure that you get that right. And then how you do the reward side of things too. Like I'm really into gamification. So all about leaderboards, all about really highlighting, these people have done the best in this key priority we've done this year, et cetera. We just in December did what we call as kind of like a year-end celebratory dinner for those team members that have really been kind of best in class. They were a leaderboard, or they were a champion in another way, and getting them together for a celebratory dinner. And that's something that, really motivates people to be able to join, at the year end.
The motivation is so interesting, isn't it? And it's also that number, like how do you even identify that right number? Because you've got to like look back on last year, and you're so right in terms of like obtaining the motivation, but making sure that you're making progression. But then January just doesn't feel like absolute hell on earth. Like how are you ever going to get?
It does, for sure. And I think that's why it's the small steps that have to be rewarded and appreciated, not just the big ones, right? And so I do something called like a pull forward champion. We name 2 every single month out of the team. And those are people that within the month were able to bring in revenue that wasn't previously forecasted. So whether that's closing a deal faster than they thought was possible, whether it's
That's
taking
awesome.
a deal that was closed, but being able to deliver it faster to the customer, and so forth. And so it might be that they've brought in, let's say, I don't know, 0.1% of our revenue that month or something. It could be something very small, but it was something that was a game changer for what we needed to do. And so they're getting recognized for that, right? And again, it's not just looking at that full number on the year. It's what did you do, in this particular month or this particular.
100%. So with your experience, because obviously like the volume of people that you oversee and then also just like the length of time, have you got any key tactics or frameworks in when you've gone in, and it might not necessarily be specifically to Mastercard, but you've gone in and you've been like, this team is underperforming? Like what comes like to mind just off the cusp of where you've got this underperforming team? Because a lot of our listeners are CROs, are VPs of sales that have got these like 50 to 60% quota attainment. Like they're not at where they need to be, but like, what do you do to actually be like, no, I've got good talent here. I definitely do. I just need to basically create a framework or create systems or processes that get them to that next stage. Like in your experience, is there anything that like stands out that's worked really well?
Yeah, well, honestly, a lot of it is just changing the scope or territory or how someone is allocated, right? Because what you see oftentimes is year over year, someone might be attached to the same set of accounts and they're getting the same results, right? But they don't want to give them up because, oh, I have this strong relationship with this person or that person. And their manager's like, oh, yeah, they're always talking to this C-level executive there. It's like, but at the end of the day, is the C-level executive buying? No, like we need to make a shift, right? And so a lot of it is just taking a look at how do you have the accounts against the team members and should there be modifications, right? Is there someone that actually you thought they were good at this particular, sub-segment, but they might be better over here. And so we do moves all the time around the team to, again, make sure, one, it's varying things up and someone's not doing the same thing year after year, but also their talents, to your point, they might be really strong. It's just they haven't been leveraged in the best way they could be.
That's a really interesting one that I don't think anyone's ever brought up. It's just literally just switching over what they're focusing on. I mean, it's crazy how I can imagine that just gives like a new lease of life almost.
Totally. Yeah. And we've seen a lot of situations where, again, someone has moved over to a different segment and they've been thriving in that new role, as an example.
And then with the process of that, does it have to get to like a certain level, or like, are you just like randomly selecting different territories, or is there actually like a framework and a process of like these two should now be switched?
It's really just taking a look and seeing what the opportunity set is. So for us, we're very segment based, right? But certain sales organizations could be territory based, right? And so it depends on how the org is structured and what makes sense, what types of products are in that particular segment that they're selling to, and does somebody have, someone new's coming in, make sure that they have, equal opportunity set, so to speak. So then we have to move, others around. I think it's this element of like constantly evaluating and looking at things versus it seeming like, oh no, they're good to go. They've been doing this for a couple years. Status quo is fine.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we speak about the status quo the whole time. It's like, honestly, like you will lose most deals to the status quo anyway, or no action, but that's super interesting. So just going back onto that first point about training, because that was a super great takeaway. What does in your world look like in terms of training? Because I think it's like impossible from company to company to be the same, but I do think there's elements of like live call coaching, identifying where their gaps are within the sales process, and then like customizing on that, and then really like call reviews, like really understanding the why as to what their actual data and metric is the poor reason. Like they got a close rate of what you didn't expect. But a lot of people, and we see this a lot, I'd be interested in your opinion because we see this all the time, is someone will be like, okay, their close rate is X, they probably got like an objection handling, or they probably got some issue, but no one actually takes the time to understand the why and to really know that actually, no, it's actually in their discovery that the issue is. So just in your world, when you think of training, what does that look like for you guys? Do you have a specific cadence, or is it just like ad hoc?
So I think when you think about training, there's a lot of different elements associated with it, right? There's the product training and making sure that the team members are actually well versed on what you're selling. I mean, as I mentioned, those 4 product families have hundreds of products within them, right? So there's constantly new opportunities, new big bets, new innovation that we need to make sure the teams are trained and well versed on, so it becomes part of their BAU with the go to market. So there's that side of the element when it comes to training. There's also just like certain processes like Salesforce.com and like how do you do all the admin element, right? Which I wish there was a lot less of the admin, but there's a lot. But somebody that is slow in being able to actually like go through those approvals and actually, close things out correctly and so forth that's going to be a detriment to their ability to win more deals faster, right? And then there's this also element of, evaluating when we do lose deals, like why, right? And so doing like a loss kind of like summary of, okay, why did we lose this deal? Because a lot of times we're just so focused on kind of praising the wins and, okay, we did a great job here. And we don't necessarily spend as much time focusing on why did we lose a deal and what could we have done differently, and making sure that people are aware of that. So highlighting that element too.
It's really interesting that you say that. I that is super interesting because I don't think enough people do it. And what I found, I'd love your opinion on this, but what I found that worked really, really well was whenever I go into businesses to try and like fix their revenue leaks or whatever you want to call it, I actually ask them, is it possible for me to speak to like 10 customers that were really close to buying but didn't buy? Well, not customers, but basically people that were like literally there but didn't buy. Like, are there people that we can go through that got through all the way to the end of the sales cycle, pull it from Salesforce, and then just me call them up and just see, because I'd love them to educate me on why they didn't buy. Because if it's a product issue or if it's fundamentally on that level, then that's fixable with tech, etc. But if it's a sales execution issue, then that's on me, and I need to basically be like, okay, well, why did we lose that through sales execution? And I think that's like hugely important as well. And but it's kind of the exact same thing as you say, as those closed loss deals. It's just like that deal evaluation that can be just like, what was the risk? Why didn't we win? Where were the gaps? And like how to fix them for the next deal. And also doing that in teams so that everyone can see it.
Totally, completely. And some personalities, right? It could just be certain personalities work better with others, right? I've gotten feedback from customers saying, hey, this person came in, they were super salesy. I just wanted them to like slow down. I was interested in learning, but I didn't want to feel like I was being pitched to. Other people 100%. Are like, wait a second, I didn't even understand why they were here. Were they trying to sell me? So you just have to understand like who you're selling to and what kind of personality is going to work with that person too.
100%. There's so much now on like sales psychology than there ever has been before. It's crazy. Like there's just so much coming out with just like the fact that it's just crazy how those personalities match. So what I'd love to also speak about is obviously you are incredibly like high up within the sales leadership front. And the one common thing that we see, and I actually felt this pain myself a few years ago, is top performing reps basically being promoted into frontline leadership role. And arguably, I actually think the frontline leadership role is one of the hardest roles, because I'm just like, especially if you've been promoted as a top rep and now you've got a group of like 10 to 15 reps that you need to coach. So when it comes to the middle layer manager for you guys, is there anything that you're doing to like coach, educate, or help those frontline leaders, especially if they have to take that pivot? And promoting internally is the best outcome, right? They know the product, they've sold the product, they've been there, the culture's there. But also it comes with, it's like they also need that level of, okay, here's now how to be a leader, here's how now to coach, here's how now to run effective one-to-ones and meetings that people are just kind of expected to know. And it is an interesting topic. So I'd just love to hear on your perspective how you've solved that, or if you've even seen that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fantastic point that you're bringing up, and the importance about it is so key, right? Because when you often see is you're taking somebody that has known every single thing about every account they've been going after, right? They know the ins and outs, they have all the notes in their head, right? They're salespersons, they have great memory, and they know every single person, etc. And now you have to take a step back and realize you're not going to know everything, right? And I can tell a quick story. I was at a conference with somebody, in this particular situation, and I spent the whole day with them in a bunch of meetings, and they knew every single thing about every meeting. And I could easily tell it was not because they'd read some brief before each of the meetings we went into. It was because they'd been in all the meetings.
Of course.
Right? And I said to them, I was like, do you think I'm like impressed with that? And they sort of thought, yes. And I said, well, actually, it's the opposite, because you should be able to let the people on your team carry those conversations. You don't have to be in every single meeting, right? 100%. You have to take a step back and understand when you do need to engage, but you shouldn't be engaging all the time, because if you're engaging all the time, then that's not how we're increasing capacity, and something else is getting missed, right? Because you're not doing the coaching that needs to happen, et cetera, right? So it's figuring out how do you really bring them on that journey of player coach versus feeling like, they're still the main player in the game.
It's so like that is like the main point, because I'm working with a company at the minute that's like ex-Bain, ex-McKinsey, super successful, but just like so intensely knowledgeable on the product. And then their reps are just left with a bit of lack of understanding on the go-to-market side. So it makes all the RVPs want to be in all the sales calls. And I'm just like, guys, this is pointless. A, because you're devaluing the sales rep. Like you're literally just like speaking over them and then trying to get the deal closed. There's no like executive buy-in alignment that you can do later on in the deal. Like you're losing leverage there. But more importantly, like this rep is just never going to learn. Like if you're there, they're never going to learn, and you're on these live calls. So your calendar just must be like chock-a-block. It's way better to be on like the, I guess, on the sidelines, get the call, review it in like 2x speed, give feedback, get them to take one thing into the next thing, and then help them on like a live deal review.
Exactly, right? And honestly, it's great if they're in a meeting and they don't know the answer to the question.
100%.
Right? Like let them go through that process and figure out how do they answer and how do they figure out how to come out of it in a positive way, versus somebody just jumping in and like, oh, I got that, whatever. And then the person never gets to learn, or they always feel like they have that fallback behind them, right? So
yeah, that's so true. So when you come to your, I don't know how many specific leaders you have between you in terms of levels, but you know how like there's loads of emphasis on sales execution. So if you need better help with discovery or whatever that may look like, there's actually not a lot in terms of like almost like leadership coaching on how to be a better leader and how to like coach down to your team. So do you have elements within like your week, months, whatever that may look like, where you have that support for the leadership as well as like the individual contributors?
So what we do just as Mastercard in general, when people become SVPs, they go through certain training. So there's different like level associated training that they go through. And then a lot of it just goes, it's on the manager, right? To make sure we're really big on, development planning and making sure that we have like the right path for someone, the right opportunity set in front of them, et cetera. And so while we do development cards once a year, we always say it's really an, evolving card, and it's always open, and we're always editing and having those conversations. So there's a lot of kind of leadership and mentorship through, your manager, but then also, others that you interact with as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting that, because that's what I see as like the main, I remember building this first sales company that we built, like just like go-to-market education, and the demand for like frontline leadership coaching, and that was just like something I never even anticipated.
I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of missteps that can happen, right? If you don't have the right leaders, and hiring is such an important element too, right? If I think about what really can, transform a team and an org, it's making those correct hiring decisions. And oftentimes we want the hiring to be the perfect person, but yet you're also trying to balance the speed element of it and time to hire as well. And so it's making sure that you can really sort of see what those key elements are that you should be looking for in those conversations, but then also not try to find the perfect, right? Because that's going to also, you're probably going to say no to people that, could have been really helpful to grow your organization.
100%. And you also just don't know until they're like in the seat, do you? Which is super challenging. And what you say about saying like not waiting for the perfect person is super interesting, because I've also noticed if I get someone that's like 75, 80% there, it's almost better because I can like mold them with the last 20% of like what works in this business, right? Like we've seen it time and time again. Someone from Mastercard could go to another company, top performer to bottom performer, because they don't have like that vehicle or infrastructure around them that makes them succeed. So I sometimes think I just need you to be like hungry. I need you to be kind, humble, want to learn, coachable, accept feedback. And I'm like, you're all mine. Like, then it's my job.
Yeah.
Because what I find, and I'd be interested in your opinion here, is whenever we get brought in because it's like an underperforming team, I'm just like, okay, well, let me just see if it's the team or if it's the manager. And 9 times out of 10 is actually the manager. I'm like, you've got a group of people here that are mid-20s, really eager to earn a lot of money, work, and be coachable. You just can't diagnose what their actual problem is and coach them effectively to get there. And that's what I see more of a problem than actually IC talent, and that executives just don't pick up on.
Totally, right. And I mean, here, not only do we have a lot of external talent coming in, but we're very acquisitive. So we acquire companies, frequently. And so we're bringing in these teams. And if you think about it, oftentimes they're coming in from a very different situation, right? Very fast growing, small, open door policy with the CEO, like all this type of, element. And then you're bringing them into a 40,000 person organization. And I mean, Mastercard was 20,000 when company I was with was acquired 11 years ago. And even that was obviously very different from we were 600 people when we got acquired. And so it's really making sure that you're providing the right leadership and guidance and support for individuals to make them understand they have a future here. It's different. There's a ton of different opportunities here, right? In their former company, they probably had a pretty linear kind of career path opportunity in front of them. At Mastercard, there's a ton of different opportunities and career paths that we can offer.
I love that, by the way, because actually normally in like large corporate companies, like 40,000 people is almost like, okay, just like next step, next step, next step. But having like all that variety is just insane. And I'm just super curious, right? If I could speak to people like yourself all day, every day, that would be like my winning. Like everyone's like, who would be your top 5 dinner guests? And mine would be just like top performing sales leaders. And people are like, but I would love to understand. So you've got a team of like, say 250, whatever, in terms of, in total. How do you keep like the culture going? Because in my opinion, the culture is like the ultimate competitive advantage. And what you just mentioned about like bringing them in, I feel like if you get a rep and Mastercard is then the vehicle to where they want to get to, that's when they're brought in and that's when the competitive advantage of the culture spikes. But I'm just genuinely curious how you manage that in terms of with such a large team. I obviously know you've got senior leadership underneath you, but I'd just be like so eager to learn.
Yeah, so one element is just being really transparent, right? So in terms of the numbers, I'm always extremely transparent with the team, where we are. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything, right? They're all key members for helping us get there. And so I want to make sure that they're getting the information they need. Another is we do a full team meeting once a month, and I would say 90% of the presenters are from the team, right? So I'm not really, a lot of people will bring in external speakers from teams or whatever to present. And my feeling is like, I want to give these people a platform to present for each other because there's so much they can learn from each other, right? We do a win section every month where, big wins that have been, won are shared, and it's all about collaboration and key, learnings from the deals and so forth, right? So it's all about learning from each other because I think that's a really big element that I've at least learned, I think, as I've progressed in my career, because you start off and you think, okay, well, I can only learn from people above me, right? I can learn from mentors and managers above me, but there's so much you can learn from peers or people below you, right? People on your teams that might not be as tenured as you are, or might not have as much seniority in a certain product area or field or what have you, you can learn a tremendous amount from as well. And so just having that open-mindedness that we can all learn from each other, I think is so.
I have 2 things that one, if you're a leader that articulates that they're open and transparent and that like everything that you've just said is just like, you've got 50% of the buy-in there already, right? They're just like, okay, they're in this with us. Like, this is super exciting that they're in the trenches. But the other thing is like, I completely agree with you because like, I'm not even that old, right? Like I'm still in my late 20s, whatever. But when I first started, I was an SDR where we were building this company, founding team, raised a ton of capital, whatever. I now hire for that role and they're educating me on all this AI and all these tools. Like when I was doing it, it was literally just like, no, there were none of these like automation in the inboxes. It was just like, you had to be creative and you had to be different because that's the only way that you were going to get in front of them. Like I used to do LinkedIn voice notes. They worked so super well, whatever. But even like being able to learn like tactics from the actual younger generations of people. I mean, that's been transformational for me and my productivity with my time for the week.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, we haven't obviously really touched on AI yet, right? But yeah,
I was just going to ask you though, you guys like leverage, I imagine you guys are like leveraging it like crazy.
Yes. And it has completely changed, how much reach and volume that you can get done, right? And so the amount of adoption that has happened in the past year has been awesome, right? It's been really excellent to see everything from outreach to drafting contracts and presentations and everything, right, can be basically sped up through everything that's happening with AI, which is great. So that's definitely something that we've put a lot of emphasis on with the team.
I completely agree. I think back to like my early career, and I'm just like when I was doing these like $500,000, $1 million deals, and that would I was just like up all night, like on Google Slides, like bringing in all these presentations, and now you can almost just like speak into like Chat GPT, and then it just like it's just insane. And I do think the adopters, it will separate. And I know everyone talks about A players and B players, etc., but it'll be interesting because I do think the A players will adopt it a lot quicker, and it will make that gap a lot wider because you'll have the people that have studied it, learnt it, because that's just why they're an A player anyway. And they'll be leveraging it day to day. And I think there'll be a slower uptake for like the less enthusiastic reps.
Yeah, I think that's correct, right? At the end of the day, we're all focused on trying to increase capacity. You have a certain number of resources. You want to make sure you're getting the most out of them. Give them as many tools to help amplify their success.
100%. And I know we've touched a lot on like coaching and developing and like training. Do you, and this is just interesting because you've got such an amazing like volume of reps. Do you have any kind of like key takeaways or anything that you can share with the listeners about retaining top talent? Because I actually think a lot of gaps within the market is just like, okay, I've got this top performer, but how do I keep them happy? Like they're like hungry for growth. You know exactly who I'm talking about, the type of person. So like some of the problem I see with companies is actually like, wow, I need to be able to retain this person. What can I offer them? It doesn't always need to be like monetary, but I just feel like from your experience, you'll have some really good like little nuggets in like what you've seen to actually retain those top performers year on year.
Yeah, a big part of it is making sure they feel like they have a path forward, right? And that their opportunity set is increasing, their scope is increasing, their mandate's increasing, whatever that is, right? Whether they're selling more products, whether their revenue goals are going up, whether their team management and FTEs under management is going up. Hopefully it's all three, right? But making sure that they're continually seeing how that is changing year over year, I think is key, right? And for some, it's you look, they've always been in one area of the business and focused on one segment. Bring them over to another segment to give them the intellectual opportunity to learn more from that standpoint too, right? I mean, you have to keep people motivated and excited about what they're doing.
Yeah, honestly, like I guess it's that. I guess it's growth and just development, right? It's just like that's what gets them up. And I presume because you are so transparent in just the way that you lead, you probably are encouraging your leadership to have these conversations. Like my biggest fear sometimes is just like, right, this top performer's been like crushing it for like a long time now. I want to have an open conversation with them about like where they're at and what they need to be like almost put me on a pip, like almost put me on a performance plan. Like what can I do to basically make this like a no-brainer for you?
Yeah, and that's why we have the development conversation, right? Every single individual has a development conversation every single year, at least once. As I mentioned, hopefully it's happening throughout the year as well, but there's this formal card that gets put into our Workday system.
That's so good.
And that is really focused on like, well, what are your goals? What are the roles that you're interested in going forward? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very supportive process to work with the team member to help them figure out, what is next.
So interesting. It's honestly just going back to that vehicle, isn't it? It's like being on the vehicle to the next destination, whether that, and everyone's different, right? Like so many people think it's money, but it's actually not always money. It can be like they just want to get better within a specific role, or they want to break into a different industry or a different territory. And it's about understanding that person so that you can deliver it for them and you're not like guessing. It's almost like a sales process.
Yeah, totally.
I love it. Awesome. So before we wrap, because I know we're coming towards the end, and this has just flown. Like honestly, I feel like I'm learning so much. But going through, not I guess specifically the acquisition, but over your course of X amount of years with what you've done, do you have any key lessons learned or key takeaways that you can share with our listeners when it comes to just being super successful in the role that you're in? Because I can imagine it's just like an insane amount of conflicting priorities, an insane amount of like organization within your blooming week, let alone your day, let alone your hour. And like that's challenging within itself, let alone all of the revenue targets that you have to your name.
I think you hit on it, right? Prioritization is key.
Okay.
And the best leaders are those that know how to prioritize the best, right?
Okay.
Because to your point, at any given minute of any given day, could be doing a million different things. And it's important to make sure that how you are spending your time makes the most sense. And that, there isn't a meeting that you're on that, look, you shouldn't really be on, someone else should have been on it, or some long email you're writing that doesn't need to be written, or what have you, right? And so it's figuring out really like what are the areas that need to be invested in, right? Is today a more customer focused day? Is it a more team focused day? Is it a partner focused day, meaning like working with other internal teams to get some sort of agenda advanced or what have you, but really thinking through how do you spend your time in the way that's most valuable.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that question, because all of like the top people that we've interviewed, like priorities always come up, like prioritization, understanding what actually matters, because you could just get so bogged down with anything.
Totally.
And almost like negotiate with yourself that it is important.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I'll get questions or people will ping me for things, and I'm like, we've already done that, right? Like you already have an answer via this other vehicle, right? We're not going through the same thing all over again, right? And so, be unafraid also to say no to things. You don't have to respond to everybody and say, yes, I'll help you with this, I'll help you with that, I'll help you with that, right? Like figure out what makes sense to invest in and pull back where it doesn't.
I think that's like the most powerful like ending we could have had, because like in all the podcasts that we've done, because no one ever makes it I've never had a leader or like seen a leader that makes it like totally acceptable for you to just turn around and be like, no, I actually have. But if you have a justification for it, it makes sense. I can't do that because this is my priority. But if you think that's wrong, please educate me.
Yeah, totally.
Insane. I love it. Honestly, Michelle, this has been amazing. I've learned a ton. I'm sure our listeners have learned a ton. I'm super excited to see what this year ends for you, what happens. It seems like the company's in a great place. It seems like you guys are growing. It seems like you've got so much to be doing with 250. That's insane. But thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Laura. Really great getting to speak with you today.
You're so welcome.